Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the very first Association of Lloyds Brokers seminar of the year. I'm Mark Rector with Lloyds. I'm also the Executive Secretary of the Association, and we're very excited about today's program, so thanks for joining us. We're going to be providing an update on the Lloyds market, and we're extremely fortunate to have all four of the U.S. regional directors from Lloyds on the panel, as well as the very first U.S. head of claims for Lloyds. So it's going to be a very interesting program. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. As you can see from the schedule, we've planned a couple of breaks, so there'll be some time for you to get up and move away from the computer before we continue. While we're going along, if you have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A tool in Zoom, and I'll be dropping in links throughout about how to get CE credit and information about our upcoming seminars through the year. And we're very hopeful that before the year is out, we'll be able to meet again face to face. So we're looking forward to that in the hopefully not too long future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panel. Enjoy.
Great. Hey, Mark, I appreciate you making that introduction. And Pat, I'm going to let you run with it for just a bit. Sorry about that.
Sure. Thanks, Rod. Well, good morning. As Mark said, welcome to the ALB's presentation and an update on Lloyds, or as we always like to remind everyone, we still refer to it as Lloyds of London. That's probably the way that you hear it and when you're discussing it in the street. The first thing I think we'd probably like to do is get a quick introduction from each of us on the panel today. We'll take 2 or 3 minutes to give you a little thumbnail sketch on what our respective roles are within Lloyds and maybe a bit of our professional background. But before we do that, we'd like to get a sense of who's in the audience, what our demographic is. So we like to take, we're gonna have some fun today. We're gonna take a few polls, just kind of peppered in during the conversation. And this is the first one. So if you take a moment, Mark's gonna post the poll here. If you would just respond to that, we'll see what the composition of our audience is. Mark, you can, as soon as you have those, it looks like we're up to about, do we have the results to the poll? There we go. Okay, let's see. We have a heavy weighting of retail brokers, wholesale brokers. We do have some cover holders in the audience, which is great. Underwrite, wow, and claims. So this is that's a really, really good mix because business is placed in all these different channels. We have, the broker market, so we have a lot of interest from retailers. Typically that could run through a wholesaler. Cover holder, which is simply that's a Lloyd-centric term for delegated authority, someone who holds the pen of Lloyd's. And of course, underwriters, you'll find this interesting because Lloyd's arguably holds the greatest collection of underwriting talent anywhere, I think. And then good to see some claims people on here as well, because I think ultimately that's why we're all here, to pay a claim when it's necessary. Let's do another quick one. Number 2, Mark, you want to put that up? Let's sort of see what people's familiarity level is with Lloyd. Okay, three short and easy answers here. We need a drum roll.
We do. Or somebody needs to start singing or something.
Very familiar, 44.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a pretty good split somewhat, and then we've got some people that are going to be green, which is always, actually the not very familiar percentage is sometimes bigger than that and as we get into this discussion, I think we'll see, if there's a single common theme among all this group, a lot of it is around the educational component. And as we always like to say, Lloyd's has just one of the most recognized names in the world. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they have some misconceptions or they don't have a very good depth of knowledge of how things work. So we're going to touch on all that today. But let's get back to a little bit about who we are, the presenters today. We're kind of an eclectic group. Each of us have a unique background. Some come from industry, regulation, academia, and so on. But I think really, in my view, that it's that diversity of experience and our unique backgrounds that really kind of make us an effective unit, I feel. And, you know, I know that if I don't have an answer to some sort of technical question, I can always rely on one of my colleagues who one of them will have the answer, and they're more than happy to share it with me. So we'll just go on. I'll go first. My name is Pat Talley, and I am a regional director for Lloyds in the U.S., meaning all of us actually work for the corporation at Lloyds. We'll drill down into what that means a little bit later, but, you know, we're not underwriters, we're not brokers, or anything along those lines, and we'll kind of get a sense of what that means and what our remit here is in the U.S. I've been with Lloyd since 2006, which makes me, I like to think the elder statesman at best, but probably more just likely the old dude. I lead the managing agent practice group for the U.S., and a little later on, we'll drill down into what that means as it has implications for you as an audience, particularly you, the brokers and other distribution partners with Lloyd's. I'm also responsible for Lloyd's 3 admitted licenses in the U.S. We're admitted in Illinois, Kentucky, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We'll get in a little bit more of that later when we get into more of these specific sections. But as you know, Lloyd's is 99% of its U.S. business is surplus lines and reinsurance, but we do have a tiny smattering of admitted business we write. Prior to joining Lloyd's, I spent 7 years as a financial consultant to the Kentucky Department of Insurance, where I spent a lot of time representing the state, or I guess I should say the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You know, I'm going to digress here. I read there are 4 different states that are called Commonwealths: Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and one other, I think maybe Virginia. And I'm really not sure what that means, what a Commonwealth means. I've been here my entire life, and I can't find anyone who can explain to me what the difference is. But anyway, I said I digress. So I represented the state on multiple task forces and working groups at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And before that, I was in the securities industry in the 80s and 90s, where I ran a fixed income trading desk at a institutional money manager in Louisville, Kentucky. So that's sort of my how did I get here explanation. So who wants to go next? And Rodney, you want to go?
Sure. Thanks, Pat. So Rodney Smith, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am the director in the Southeast for Lloyd's, as well as the lead for the cover holder practice group. I am originally from Atlanta, so one of the kind of few people that are native, I guess. It's kind of a transient town here. We have a lot of folks moving in and out. I actually went to the University of Georgia and majored in insurance and risk management years ago. So, you know, I kind of actually picked this as my profession when I was in college, and came out and started work for the Aetna back at the time, a commercial property underwriter. So I've was always kind of in property for years and years. I did move from that over into the claims side for a while. So I was working for TPAs for a few years, and then eventually got into the casualty side of it when I was working for AIG. So I've been kind of on both sides, worked at XL Capital as well. And then after XL, I went to work at ICAT. And so ICAT is based out of Boulder, Colorado. I was the regional VP for the Eastern Seaboard for them. And their trick was writing wind on the East Coast and writing quake on the West Coast. They had some problems because the companies that were backing them were always saying, okay, well, we don't want to renew our contract. And so eventually they went and got a syndicate at Lloyd's, which was a great thing because it really added a lot of stability to the ICAT product, and they could run everything through their Lloyd's syndicate, and the syndicate could go out and raise the capital, and then they could go deploy it. So really, I've been with Lloyd's since 2010. But prior to that, I was kind of a de facto underwriter at Lloyd's because I worked for the ICAT syndicate as well. I also do some work on the side where I do some teaching. So if you are aware of the National Alliance, maybe the CIC designation or the CRM designation, I do teach those classes as well. So I teach, just this week, I taught one for the CRM courses and the Ruble courses as well. So I do try to really stay involved in the overall marketplace. And I guess that's it for me. How about Dawnmarie? Would you like to go?
I would love to. Thank you, Rod. So Dawnmarie Black, and I've been with Lloyd's for 3 years, but I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I've held various roles as an underwriter, as a broker. I started my career with Chubb straight out of college, made a transition to AIG, two very different underwriting philosophies, two very different companies, and then made my move to the brokerage side. So I was in facultative reinsurance for a number of years, and then I morphed into program business. And all throughout that, I've worked closely with Lloyds. So for a number of the positions that I've held, I've been based in the U.S. and reported to the London office, and really, done business development here in the U.S. on behalf of Lloyds for a number of years. Currently, I guess I should have said what my role is here. I'm the U.S. Regional Director, and I'm head of broker relationships here in the U.S., but part of the global distribution strategy team. So what I've really enjoyed about this role so far is working closely with our global colleagues. So whether it's Singapore, Australia, in Europe, and obviously in the UK. So I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get into our specific sections on our specialties. And I think that's all I have, but I'm excited to be here today and excited to be here with all of my colleagues as well.
Enya, you want to go next?
Sure. So this is Enya here. I'm not based in Iceland as I wish I could. I'm actually based in Texas. So my background is really the Northern Lights, as you can tell.
You had an ice storm there recently, so it is kind of like Iceland, right?
In a way, a few weeks back, we had back-to-back ice storm in Texas, as you guys may have heard, which was really, really unpleasant for a while, but we're back to normal. Now we're back to summer weather like you guys are. So my background is very unique. I came from China. I was born and raised in China. So if you may hear a slight sense of accent, because I grew up in a different country and I have teachers from US, Canadian teachers and Arab teachers, Australian teachers. So I end up having a very mixed accent. I can't really tell where I'm coming from right now based on my accent anymore. I'm trying to speak like a Texan. Y'all, that's what we say here. As far as professional background, I've been, I would say, in the insurance business since I was a college graduate. I was an insurance major like Rodney was. I got my insurance degree in undergrad and graduate, and eventually I went to Georgia, did my PhD in insurance. There's a thing called PhD insurance. Yes, there is, and I have one. So sometimes I call it, PhD is really short name for permanent head damage, which thankfully, I'm recovering from that by working with Lloyds. So I was a college professor before I joined Lloyds. I taught insurance at North Texas for 9 years, had a lot of fun with college graduates, as well as all our partners in the industry. I work with the brokers, retail wholesale, and carriers, made a lot of friends in that regard, and eventually find my way into Lloyds. Just such a fun group to be around with my teammates here. We are definitely having a lot of fun working with you all, the broker friends, and as well as our carrier friends at the same time. My previous background, I worked for broker as well as carrier when I was back in China, very briefly. And now, as much as degree I have a whole collection of degrees, still I felt the best learning I had is ever since I joined Lloyds 5 years ago. Every day is something different. Every day we learn something new. Hopefully we can give you guys something to take away today to help you better understand Lloyds. So we're here to really be your friends and be your partners. So thank you for having us.
I guess that leaves our now we need a drum roll to introduce Carey, our newest partner in crime. Take it away, Carey.
Man, I feel like such a new guy. Gee whiz. I'm Kerry Bond. I'm the U.S. head of claims. My role came about as part of the future at Lloyds. I've been here a whole 6 months. So, wow. However, not my first experience in insurance. I left that active duty in the Army, had no clue what I was going to do. So I went to Dallas, Texas, and I said, if I get a job, that's what I'm going to do. If I don't have a job in a month, I'm leaving. Well, 2 weeks in, Safeco Insurance hired me and trained me to be a multi-line adjuster. And that was the start of my insurance career. And I am thankful to Safeco to this day because they trained me to handle every line of business that they wrote. And that training has been so useful. But I digress just a little bit. Let me come back current and move forward a little bit. Okay, so started with Safeco, and they introduced me to stormtrooping. So I quit working for Safeco, and pretty much the entire decade of the 90s, I was a stormtrooper. I was a professional adjuster. That's all I did. And every named storm or catastrophe that happened in the 90s, I was on the ground trying to handle claims as I could get them. 1999-ish, came back to the corporate side of the house with One Beacon Insurance, the final iteration of the CGU, CGNU mergers and acquisitions and so forth. But came back to the corporate side of the house with One Beacon. And when that company went through its final iteration, the leadership team there moved over to Nationwide, and I came with them. And I became the regional director of claims for Nationwide. And after that, or during that time, 911 happened. I was called back to active duty, went to Iraq for a year, led an advisory team there, rebuilt the Iraqi Engineer School, came back to the States. I was here a year, and I was called back to active duty once again, went to Afghanistan for a year, and one of the coolest experiences of my life, I worked on the staff of the Supreme Commander of all forces in Afghanistan. It was mind-boggling, but one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life. To get back to the States, Travelers has gone through my region and basically poached all of my best managers. So I call them up, said, guys, I'm back in the States, come on back. And he says, no way, you come to us. So subsequently, I moved over to Travelers as their AVD claims for the Southeast region. That was my first iteration in Atlanta. So worked Travelers for a couple of years, got a little proud of myself, quit and tried consulting, and found that I absolutely hated it. So came back to the corporate side of the house once again in non-standard auto, did that for a few years, and then I moved over to Canal Insurance up in Greenville, South Carolina. And that was in the logistics space, great experience there. And what do you know? Then I came over to Travelers last fall, right in the middle of hurricane season. And this remains one of the best insurance experiences I've ever had in my life. Great group of folks to work with, great group of brokers, cover holders. Everybody that touches the Lloyd product has been absolutely wonderful. I look forward to working with everyone, and I'll get into my focus areas when I come back again. Thanks for having me this morning.
Great. Thanks, Kerry. Thanks. Well, that's sort of a little, like I said, a little thumbnail sketch of who we are. And I think now, we all work, everyone on both sides of this call work in this industry. And I think it's important for us to get a little sense of, this unparalleled year we've been through. So I think Rodney's going to give us a little bit of an update in terms of just the ins and outs of what this year's looked like from a business perspective and some insights from Lloyd's standpoint.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Pat. And we're going to be putting up some slides here. And the idea behind this is to kind of give you a quick snapshot of the global view and then very quickly drill down into the kind of US version of this. So that's what we're going to run through real quick today. I'm sure we can get these slides to you if you want a copy of them. When we get into them, you'll see a lot of charts and graphs and a lot of very small numbers. So if you're missing something, don't worry about it. We will convert this to a PDF and make sure we can get it out to everybody. But this is our kind of newest theme that we have going on. So sharing risk to create a braver world. Mark, if you'll go ahead and change that to the next slide. Thanks. And I really like this second slide because it kind of drives that point home, right? When you look around the world and you look at how that capital comes into the Lloyd's marketplace, you can see that it's really distributed all around the globe, right? So the whole globe is sharing in those risks. And if you think about 2017 here in the United States, we had Harvey, Irma, Maria come through, big events. In the Southeast, Lloyd's paid out over $5 billion. The great thing about that is those funds then kind of helped rebuild a lot of the Southeast. and those funds didn't come from the Southeast. It didn't affect the GDP. It actually was kind of drawn from all around the globe. But you can see here where the monies are coming from, and it is kind of interesting if you look towards the bottom there. So you see a worldwide non-insurance. It's the second from the bottom. We see more and more of that coming into the market nowadays. So that tends to be kind of the Wall Street money or the pension fund money coming into the market. And they have a real big appetite for Lloyds. And the reason they're doing that is because we're uncorrelated to the stock market. So it gives them an alternative to kind of invest outside of the stock market. Mark, if you go on to the next slide, please. There we go. So this actually kind of shows you a 5.5 year run of the numbers at Lloyd's. The 2020 numbers will be out next week on the 31st. So we'll have those numbers out. I'm going to give you a sneak peek on those numbers just a couple slides from now. So don't tell anybody. I'm sure the CEO would be angry at me, but I have access to them. So I figured we'd give the US numbers out. Anyway, I wanted to kind of draw your attention to the top line there, and you see kind of the gross written premium. This is global premium still, so we're going to drill into the US in just a sec. But as you run through that, you can kind of see fairly consistent growth each year, and then 2018 to 2019 a little bit down. Some of that could be because the sterling to dollar transition there. And then when you get into the half year for 2019 and the half year for 2020, which was the most recent numbers that we had released, you can see that even though 2020 was a very dramatic year, I'll say, from the pandemic and everything else going on, that the premiums are slightly up for the first half of the year. Also, probably the most interesting thing is right below that in the combined ratio. If you look at the half year for 2020, we have 110% combined ratio. But if you take out COVID, that brings us down to 91% combined ratio. So you can see the huge impact that COVID had on it, but then also a lot of the work that Lloyd's has been doing over the years to make sure our combined ratio comes down below 100%. So if you see all the way back to 2016, really was the last time we were below 100%, popped up quite a bit in 2017 because of the storms, back down a bit in 18, and then 19 as well. So it's interesting to see that. Mark, if you'll go on to the next slide, we'll actually talk about COVID a little bit. So these are estimated COVID losses, and you can see in May, then June, how they kind of slowly transitioned up. It is interesting, just 2 days ago, so our CEO came out and said, no, it's going to be more like 6 billion pounds. So it's amazing how that has really gone up. To give you a sense of that, that is about 8.6 billion US. So a very, very large event. You can see these two pie charts here where you can see where it's really coming from, and event cancellation is the big driver for that loss. And then the US is the big driver as far as geography. So that's what we have so far for our COVID losses. Mark, if you go on to the next slide. Thanks. So let's get into the U.S. market. Now, you know, everything I showed you before was global. We're going to jump into the U.S. market. I like this slide. It's a little busy, so let me help you kind of clear it and give you a sense of what's going on here. What it's really saying is, and especially when you look at the top kind of left-hand charts, there is how much of a GDP from a country is being utilized for insurance premiums. And what you see there is North America, about 3.3% of our GDP is dedicated to insurance, which really says we kind of partake of a lot of insurance. I think that the insurance agents and brokers are really good at selling their product, so we tend to buy a lot more insurance. If you drop down right below that, it actually breaks it out into countries. And so what you see there is the US is about the fourth largest as far as uptake or the amount of GDP that we expend towards insurance premiums. Looking over on the right hand side, it's just showing you the total amount. So if you were to look at that in North America, 762 billion in premium is generated in North America. But if you drop down there, you can see that in the US about 712 billion premium is generated, and this is non-life premium, right? So most of that by far is in the admitted space, and then the E&S space is a little bit smaller than that. And we'll look at that in just a little bit as well. Mark, if you'll go on to the next slide, please. So this is kind of the bar chart across the top there is showing you in the blue the admitted, in the gray it's showing you the E&S lines. And what you see there is you know, how small the E&S piece is compared to the overall insurance market, especially when we're talking about the admitted piece of it. But you do see that we are growing the E&S line a lot quicker than the admitted group is able to grow theirs. And if you look at the bottom, you see the growth for ENS is generally a little bit higher than the admitted piece of it, and it's also starting to take on a little bit more market share as well. The lines that are running through these kind of bar charts are actually the loss ratio. And again, if you look at that, traditionally ENS has a better loss ratio than the admitted group does. But in 2017, that line inverts. Remember, we had all those storms. And so you see that the ENS actually has a worse loss ratio than the admitted market for a few years, and then gets back on par with that. Mark, if you go on the next slide, please. This is also kind of showing you, again, the size of the market, and then also Lloyd's version of that in the US. So in the admitted line, 671 billion is all the premium that's written in the US. And when you look at Lloyd's, about 200 million in admitted premium in the US. So we're very, very tiny. We don't even rate a bar. We're so small when you look at that chart. When you look at the reinsurance piece of it, 110 billion is the total US premium that's generated, and Lloyd's generated about 6 billion in premium. And these are 2019 numbers. Remember, we'll have our 2020 numbers out next week. And then finally, we get to the ENS portion of that, where about 54 billion in premium is written in the ENS market, and of that, Lloyd's writes about 12 billion, or about 23% of the market. And that's what we've seen with Lloyd's over the years, is that we tend to be in that 23, 24, up to 25% of the market, which is pretty amazing to be 25% of an entire market in the US. And it's been a really good market for us as far as the ENS. Mark, if you go on to the next slide, please. So this is actually, again, just kind of showing you just the ENS piece of it. So we stripped away the admitted part, and you can really see, what's going on in the ENS market over time. And you do see that there's been very kind of consistent growth there for years, and then all of a sudden in 2018 and 2019 we see some good sized pops as well. So it's been really encouraging for the ENS marketplace. Mark, if you go on the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So, and then this shows you the Ens Insurer Ranking. So you can kind of see the different ranks there with, Lloyd's writing about 12.5 billion, and then you have AIG or Lexington coming in at 2.9, and Markel coming in at 2.7. So really it drops off into the 2 billion range pretty quickly. The interesting thing I'll note here is when you look at all of these competitors, on this chart, many of them are actually syndicates at Lloyd's and participate in the Lloyd's marketplace. So not only are they competing with Lloyd's in the ENS marketplace in the US, they actually cooperate and participate with Lloyd's through the Lloyd's marketplace. Mark, if you go on the next slide, please. So I told you I'd give you a quick peek at what's going to happen in 2020, and here it is. And what you can see, this is the US production, the gray is the reinsurance, the blue is the insurance, and so you can kind of see how we break out our business here in the US. 2020, we finally crossed the 20 billion, I'm sorry, 2019, we finally crossed the 20 billion mark. And then in 2020, we saw a slight increase as well. So it's encouraging to see that. There was a lot going on last year, obviously with the pandemic, but also with rates going up and capacities going down in certain areas. So it is encouraging to see here in the US that we're able to increase our premium in 2020. Mark, if you go on to one more, please. Great, thank you. So this actually shows you how our distribution channels work here in the US. And we really kind of work through 3 main channels, which in this case, they call it non-binder, but you would know it as open market. So that is large accounts that come into the open market. The broker sits with the underwriter or virtually sits with the underwriter and makes that transaction. The other cover holders, which Pat was touching on, and we'll go a bit more in detail on cover holders in a little bit, but cover holders is really one of our second largest distribution channels, and a very great one for us, where we have binding contracts with MGAs and MGUs all over the US, and they generate about 32% of the revenue that comes in for us in the US. Then we have service companies. So service companies are like a cover holder, but it's actually set up by one of the Lloyd's syndicates. And usually it's a specialty line that they want to write directly with wholesalers or with retail agents here in the US. So that just kind of gives you a sense of how the business comes in from the US. Mark, if you go on to the next slide, please. Great. And then this shows you our 2020 classes of business. So you can see property is our largest one. But I will note that if you see casualty financial professional right below it, and then 2 down from that, you see casualty other. If you were to add our 2 casualty lines together, they actually are as large, or actually a little bit larger than our property DNF book here in the US. So we do write a lot of property, but we also are writing a lot more casualty and casualty financial professional. And then I also wanted to mention just down at the bottom, specialty other. And specialty other for us actually includes terrorism or active assailant. It includes things like cyber, and we've seen dramatic growth in those areas in the past 5 years. So it's almost $1 billion just coming out of the US for those lines of business. All right.
Wow, Rod, you're like a Swiss watch. That's 10:30 or 9:30.
Lucky.
Perfect. Couple quick questions, Rod. How many? I forget this number just to get a sense of the size on the. How many cover holders is it? Like it's over 1,000, isn't it, in the U.S.? 1,200.
That's right. Yeah. So we say we have about 1,250 cover holders. So that could be individual contracts, which would mean you would have a cover holder that might have 2 or 3 contracts within their office. So we're probably in the 450 to 500 range of actual cover holders, and they may have 2 or 3 contracts each. So yeah, and cover holders are a great. You know what? Don't get me started because I have to do that later on. But I'm going to go into a whole thing about why cover holders are the best.
There you go. You'll absolutely. And the other thing, one thing that jumped out at me is that you see a lot of times in some of the trade publications that'll list the top surplus lines writers, and a lot of times those lists will say it'll be U.S. based. So you're going to see AIG as number 1, Nationwide's number 4, and that Berkshire and that sort of thing. So when you look at it, include Lloyd's, which is viewed as it's obviously based in the UK. That's what you want to look at, because I've noticed a lot of times we're not even on these lists that Business Insurance and others will publish. So you have to make sure you're looking at the global picture because we're not viewed as a domestic.
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting. Another plug for the cover holders. So, if you look at our cover holder distribution chain here in the US, it's about $7 billion in premium. And that's double what AIG writes in all of their premium in the E&S side. So, it is a huge market for us here in the United States.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Rod. I guess we'll move to the next part, which I'm gonna do sort of it's a little bit of a hodgepodge, just a quick summary of like Lloyd's structure, how Lloyd's America fits into that. This will be, many of you, based on our survey, will probably already be aware of some of this, so we'll go pretty quickly, but we do want to make sure that those who are just now being exposed to some of this, we're actually able to give them a deeper understanding. So we'll cover a lot in just a few minutes, but you also can submit questions and we'll have a Q&A at the end of this. But before we do that, I want to, these polls are kind of fun. So, and this is going to really be a fun one because, Lloyd's is famously known for insuring the exotic things, celebrity body parts and all that cool stuff. So with that in mind, Mark, let's put up poll number 4 here. You have to guess here, which one of these has Lloyd's never insured? Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards' hands, Troy Polamalu's hair, the collection of jokes maintained by Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and Abbott and Costello's business relationship. We're seeing these things crank along here. Give you another few seconds.
And is there a prize for the winners?
Yeah, Rob, what do you have offered up today?
I would say a free Krispy Kreme donut on a Monday because they're giving those out to anybody, whether you had a shot or not, every Monday. Yeah. So, there we go.
There you go. Okay, so we'll see. Okay, we're going to share the results now. Okay, this is interesting because through Lloyd's, it can't be strange enough. So we're going to see what we have 3% saying Keith Richards' hands. Well, no, that we actually have insured Keith Richards' hands for many, many years. I think Lloyd still may. Troy Polamalu's hair. Sorry, he had a contract with Head and Shoulders, and so Lloyd's did insure his hair. The correct answer, 25% of you got the joke collection of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. To our knowledge, you never can say never, but that we have never insured that. But we did insure the business relationship between Abbott and Costello. For those of you old enough to remember Abbott and Costello, famous comedic team back in the 50s, but they had a notoriously rocky relationship. So they were insuring and indemnifying against should that break up and what would be the impact of that. So that's, like I say, a part and parcel to what Lloyd's is known for. We could go on for days for the things that Lloyd's is insured that are just off the beaten path. Some that come to mind are Betty Grable's legs, if you remember her. The jewelry that they wear at the Oscars, you'll see them coming out there, and sometimes that's a very big target for theft. I think we've done Bruce Springsteen's voice, Tina Turner's legs, I think, a wine taster's nose, coffee taster's taste buds, and on and on. So anyway, that's we're going to try and keep those going because that's what really makes Lloyd's fascinating. So real quickly, we hear a lot. Everyone says Lloyd's is a market. So we're going to touch on that really quick. What does that really mean? Well, it's unlike a monolithic carrier that has a single pipeline, Chubb, Travelers, things like that. Lloyd's is made up of syndicates. There are about, I think, 90 at last count. There used to be hundreds, but they, the consolidation, the big have gotten bigger. And a syndicate is really just a group of members who form together to provide capital and accept risk. It's a subscription market, where everyone signs in for whatever their appetite is. You might want to lead and take it all. You might want to split it up in quartiles or whatever. And it's all based on their syndicate's particular appetite and capacity. They share premiums pro rata based on that. And then if they're profits, that's yours. If there's a claim, then you share it in a similar way based on those percentages that you've signed on for. These are names that many of you will recognize: Hiscox, Britt, which has a local presence there in Chicago, Ascot, Canopius, and so on. And then there are
here in the U.S. names that we would know, right? So Travelers, Liberty, Chubb,
yes,
Hill,
Berkshire.
Right. Hartford has, Navigators and CNA Hardy. So, yes.
Yeah, so they've got a foot in each pool, which is interesting. It's a fascinating study as to why some people have their own surplus lines mechanism, but also have a presence at Lloyd's for various business reasons. It makes sense for them. We see more and more of that. People want to get into Lloyd's. The activities of the syndicates are run by managing agents. There are, I think, 55 of those, and that's really simply a firm that that manages all the activities on behalf of the syndicate. They employ the underwriters and the actuaries and maintain all the day-to-day infrastructure that allows the syndicate to operate. And underpinning all of this is the corporation at Lloyd's, which is the entity that we all work for. What is the corporation? It's sort of, I like to always use the analogy, just sort of think of it as the back office of the market. It manages Lloyd's global network of licenses. Lloyd's has nearly, I think, around 100 discrete separate licenses. And between those and cross-border trading arrangements, Lloyd's is truly global and writes in over, I think, 200 territories around the world. So that requires a lot of maintenance. It's Lloyd's, really probably premier asset is that those global list of trading rights, which you can't buy those at the Dollar General. They also, the corporation has a big legal team, keeps everyone on the straight and narrow, and deals with regulators around the globe. Lobbies for issues of interest, in Washington, for the market has particular legislation that it would like to see, and really just kind of keeps the trains on the tracks to facilitate the market's ability to do what it does best, which is, just provide world-class underwriting and maintain its position as the world's leading specialist market, which it's done for 330 some odd years now.
Yeah, and I think that the great thing about the syndicates is, if you start a syndicate at Lloyd's, today, or let's say you start one tomorrow, instantly you get access to licenses in over 200 territories and countries. So it's one of those things where I think that's why we see so many U.S. companies going through the Lloyd's marketplace, because you just instantly get access to that. Also, if you're kind of a smaller or startup syndicate, you also instantly get access to the ratings. So you get the AM Best, the Fitch, S&P ratings that Lloyd's carries. You don't have to wait the 5-year period and pay all the extra fees that carriers do to get rated. You're actually able to get those ratings from day one. So there's a lot of kind of communal advantages to that. Also, Lloyd's, the corporation, does a lot of back office work for the syndicates that you wouldn't have to do. So if you're doing the accounting or tax work, you're doing the regulatory stuff, all those things that carriers have to do kind of in their back office are done by the Lloyd's Corporation. So that benefits the syndicates and gives them time really to focus on disciplined underwriting.
Absolutely. It's and every day the corporation's remit kind of grows. If there's something needs to be done, that's who does it, because it's the underwriters and
right,
who pay for all this. So that's basically the structure of how the market works. Mark, let's put up question number 9. So since we're talking about how long Lloyd's has been around, let's see what the audience knows about this.
Pat and Rod, you mentioned the benefits of being part of Lloyd's. I think those of you who have worked with Lloyds before, you will understand one of the benefits of Lloyds is you have a lot of syndication. So by being at Lloyds, if you go into Lloyds physically in the building, which will reopen on May the 17th, officially reopen the floor. So when you walk to that floor, you know who you're going to talk to. You can get the slip filled up within an hour by working with different syndicates. So you have the capacity from various syndicates who have shared that capacity and shared that expertise, which is the huge benefit of being part of Lloyds. Is you enjoy the benefits of different syndicates who share the risk, who provide the expertise in underwriting, and you're talking to the makers of decision right away. You don't have to go through chain of command several levels. As the domestic carriers, you get to talk to them right away, face to face, and place your business right there. So it's a huge advantage of Lloyds having that model of syndication.
Yeah, it's a great point, Enya, because if anything I've heard my entire career here is that a decision can be made like that. We don't have to wait for the risk committee to meet on the third Thursday of the month. I mean, you go in there and this guy's going to commit millions of dollars of capital in the blink of an eye. And it's fascinating to watch. If you ever have a chance to visit the underwriting room upon reopening, or if you have in the past, you've seen just what a unique mechanism that is. Okay, it looks like we have a pretty good, the correct answer is a coffee shop, Edward Lloyd's coffee shop. So just right at 40% of you got that. I think Mark tried to shake it up by saying Edward Lloyd's dockside office. That threw people off. The Royal Exchange and Ship Tavern. Just real quick, we won't dwell on it, but it is a fascinating story because a lot of people think, that was really not where insurance was invented, but this model of insurance. In Edward Lloyd's coffee shop, you had people who had merchants who needed coverage and business people who had money. So there was a natural marriage of those things. And that's when, really the fundamentals of how this subscription model works, where someone takes 30%, someone takes 40%, that, the process that supports it's changed, but the fundamental way that risk is placed has not changed in 3 centuries. I have 2 pieces of trivia here I want to put in. We always like to throw out. We believe the origin of the word underwriting comes back from the Edward Lloyd's days, because you would actually, someone would post the name of a risk, and then you would literally write under the line if your interest, what your interest was in writing that risk. So you literally wrote under the line, under underwriting. I think that sounds plausible to me. I have no way of proving it, but that's what we've always heard. And second, an interesting thing is that until about 10 years ago, Lloyd's actually used a 3-year accounting period. And part of that harkens back to the fact that back then you had such a long tail, a loss notification period. If you had a ship sailing across the ocean, it might take 3 months to get there and then 3 months for word to come back, whether or not, it made safe passage. So it just naturally lended itself to a longer reporting period, which carried on forever. And now, Lloyd's found itself, if it wanted to be, rated and measured apples to apples with its peer group, it had to go to a 12-month cycle of accounting. So that's just another part of this history that I think is so fascinating.
And then from the coffee shop days, a lot of those terms carried over. So anybody in a uniform today within the Lloyd's building is deemed a waiter, right? And so that's carried over from the coffee house days. And then also, again, not sure if this is true, but it seems right. When you sit down with the underwriter to talk about something, you sit down in the box, right? It's the box. And the idea is they would turn over crates of coffee and sit down and have their meetings back then in the coffee shop. So that's why you get that term, the box, right? Because you're sitting on the box with the underwriter making the deal.
Cool. So I'm gonna make notes here because we're always collecting these little bits of trivia that we pick up along the way, and we'll just whip those out and use them.
I think
How many years,
from
Pat?
each
You should have
other.
known that by now. Come on.
I should have.
That's the beauty of these, right? We learn from each other as much as we're sharing knowledge with everybody else.
Yeah.
That's true.
It never changed. I mean, like I say, the one thing about Lloyd's, I learned something new every day. In any other job I had, at some point you reach a ceiling, but here it's like almost infinite. The people you're going to meet and the knowledge you'll pick up, it almost seems it's endless. But anyway, let me get back to my quick little thumbnail because we're trying to stay on point. Rod had said, Lloyd's is 99% of our business in the U.S. is surplus lines. I guess about $20 billion, I guess collectively. And why surplus lines as opposed to admitted, and we just talked about it. We're saying Lloyd's is known as a specialist market, be that satellite launches, celebrity body parts, wind farms, whatever. And those are very complex, asymmetric type risks. They're difficult to underwrite, and it just lends itself to the surplus line space because you have what we call freedom of rate and form. You don't have to file wordings or rates for approval. So you can, custom tailor your wordings to your specific needs. Use a British term there, it's bespoke. You have bespoke wordings. Rod, you remember the first time you bought a bespoke suit, which translates in English to it's $800 more expensive?
Yes. And it took me, no one told me what bespoke was. So I kept using that term, and I'm like, are we speaking English, right?
That's right. Lounge suit. So now real quickly on that, the standard markets always are quick to say, well, be careful with surplus lines. You got the big red stamp on there. There's no guarantee fund and that thing. But I always like to, kind of unpack that just a little bit and say, guarantee funds vary by state, but most of them have a limit, might be 50 grand, might be 100 grand, or they might have a limitation on how large you can be to financially even participate in the guarantee fund. So there are, there are caveats there. That leads me to my next point really quick, that it's, if you take nothing else away from this discussion, we always like to address what makes the credit proposition of Lloyd's so compelling. And that's what many of you have probably heard of as the chain of security. There are 3 links in that chain, but basically the upshot is that you've got several, I think nearly $100 billion in assets in those links. You have premium trust funds so that every dollar of premium goes in there and comes in and out. And so you've got that as an asset, which are those are several assets. So they're not, they're not joint. So only the underwriters who place premiums in there can access those. And if those are burned through, you've got the funds at Lloyd's, the second link, which is, again, multiple billions of dollars that are based on sort of similar to risk-based capital. What is the capital or needed to support the risk profile of a particular syndicate? And then they take that and they put an uplift on that or a haircut to add additional funding. So you've got that reservoir of funds. And then finally, the kind of the gold standard is the last link in the chain, which is the central fund. And that is 4 billion plus of mutual assets, meaning that, if anyone burns through in the entire market, they can petition through the council, and that can be access to pay claims. It's happened a few times over the years, not very often, but when you've got 4 billion plus, I don't have the numbers in front of me, sitting there as the absolute guarantor, then the guarantee limit internally, the limit on that is your policy limits. It's not arbitrarily fixed at 100,000 or 50,000. It's whatever the policy limit is. So that's what gives us these strong, robust ratings from all the 3 national rating agencies, because there's a compelling argument through that security chain that you don't see a lot of times in other surplus lines carriers. So always keep that in mind. In the U.S., Lloyd's America, we have about 35 employees, maybe 40 now. You've got a good chunk of those here on the call today. Our job is to represent the market's interests throughout the U.S., to educate brokers, agents, and other stakeholders throughout the market, and to attend and represent Lloyd's at all the major trades, WSIA, RIMS, target markets, things like that. Because, like I say, we're sort of flag bearers for the market because it's obviously based elsewhere. So that's really sort of our remit here in the U.S. We're getting close to where we need to take our first break, but I want to do one more trivia question here. Mark, why don't you put up number 6? I want to get a sense of how often, if the audience here has traveled to London, or how with what regularity they get there if they do go. Okay. These polls have been great because they're really well spread. There's not a overall weighting in any one category. Okay. Let's see, Mark, you want to just end that? Okay. There's the results. I've never been, but it's on my list. Okay. Get your shot, get your vaccines, of course, and wait for the third wave to but we don't know what the future brings. Hopefully some sense of normality. We'll come back, but highly recommended that you go. And if you do go, let us know. We can help arrange, an entree into Lloyd's. It is the most magnificent thing. I mean, it's fascinating to see. Looks like a lot of you do go once a year. I think we typically try in normal times, we try and get there, twice, maybe 3 times a year, depending. But obviously everything is in flux. But it really helps get a sense of how things work.
A good barbecue place in London as well, right?
And that is, get the plug. What's the name of it?
Bodine's.
Bodine's. There you go. Yeah, but no Miller Lite, just Coors. That's all they have. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that, I think we're going to, Mark, should we just want to take our first break? I show it as 9:50, so we'll maybe reconvene at 10:05.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds good. Take a break, walk away from your desk, go get a cup of coffee or some refreshments, and we'll be back in 15 minutes.
Okay, well, welcome back. Hope you had a good break. Got some coffee. Help you stay awake. Hopefully we're keeping this moving along. Again, we encourage you to submit some questions. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. Nothing's off limits. This is a very, we're doing this very unstructured, and just would love to hear whatever you have to say. So certainly feel free to add your comments. What we're going to do now is really just kind of spend about 10 minutes or so with each of the regional directors, so they can give you a better sense of what their role is here in the U.S. And after we go through that, we're going to take another little break, and then we'll introduce Carey, because he's got, we're really excited to have the claims element now represented. So he gets a full 20 minutes. So we're going to do that after that. So we'll start off with Enya, who's going to tell us about her role and areas of focus. So with that, Enya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pat. Definitely, Carey is our star performer here. So we're going to be really brave and give him all the time. Carey will love you. So my role, I see it in different directions. And as Pat and Rod and Dawnmarie, we all share a common core of responsibilities. We're based in the region. We used to be called regional director. I think that regional may be dropped sometime soon, because Hank was telling me, don't use that regional anymore, just saying director. Anyhow, so myself playing 3 different roles. For one, in the region where I'm based, I'm working with local either brokers, so risk managers, be it wholesale, be it a retail broker or a cover holder in my region. Because in my region, I do work with hundreds of people in that regard. As for education purposes, Pat mentioned we do a lot of job when I say education, it's not really lecture over you. When I say education, it's really saying, how do we help people better understand Lloyds? Because there's a huge mystery around Lloyds. So we're trying to demystify Lloyds on a daily basis. You may be working in insurance for 30 plus years. If you haven't worked with Lloyds yet, Lloyds still is mysterious in a way. That's what I find out when I joined Lloyds. With all my degrees, it doesn't matter. Lloyds is a different animal. And that's the same way for a lot of the insurance agent brokers in my region. So for us to help them in a sense of saying, how do we help you better understand how Lloyds work and how to access Lloyds? That's what we call education. So we can do a CE course for you for an hour, for 2 hours. If there's a need in your local office, call us and let us know. We can offer CE classes in different states. We have already been approved as a CE provider. And we can even just do a casual lunch and learn to half an hour, depends on the need. And that's what we do on a daily basis. So that's part of my first role is education. And the second aspect of my first role as the director for the region was really to be the connection point. You may have a need to access Lloyds and you happen to have no connection in that regard. So you come to us, we'll connect you with the right people. For example, a retail broker saying, I need a cover holder in that semi-precious stone. I have a book of business in that regard. Do you have a cover holder? And we do. So I will put you in touch with that cover holder that you guys can work together. So my job is just simply connecting you with the right contact at Lloyds. And sometimes could be a US retail or wholesale broker saying, hey, I need someone in London who can guide me in this regard for this book of business, for this idea. What do I do? So we as a director in the region can put you in touch with the right contact in London depends on your needs. So that's kind of the connection part. And the last part, in my opinion, of my first role as a director for the region was being a resource. When I say resource, that can be just answer a simple question, saying, how do I make sure when I have my client with a Lloyds paper, how can I make sure this is an A rating? So I will share with you our AM Best A rating document to help you assure the clients understand every single syndicate at Lloyds enjoy the same rating, which is A with AM Best. So just as simple as that. And sometimes that can be saying, hey, I didn't get an email from my broker in London. He may be on vacation. Can you guys help me ask this question? Do you have some documentation can help us? So be a resource to you, to your clients on a local basis. To make it clear, we don't get involved in underwriting or claims on a day-to-day basis. That's the job of your underwriter, your brokers, and your syndicate. That's not our job. But if you do have major issues on the claim side, you have Carey being here. And if you involve local, say, brokers, you want us to help, we're here to support you. So we're a resource to all of you in all aspects, not a day-to-day claim underwriting basis. So that's the first part of my job, being a director for Lloyds in the region. And the second part of my job, as we are evolving as a team, we used to be just regional director for each region. Now we're evolving as team, as all the insurance is evolving as industry. We're more towards saying practice leader. So I myself is focused on risk management, trying to focus on how do we engage our risk manager friends and clients or prospective clients, excuse me, prospective clients in a sense of saying, how do we better understand the clients? We understand the broker, you guys are our ears and eyes on the ground. You work with clients on a daily basis. You understand clients better than we do. We trust you and we rely on you to bring business into Lloyds. We don't be in the way of you doing business. But at the same time, we want to understand the clients better from the market perspective. How can we serve the market better by a deeper understanding of the clientele here in the US? So that's when we start to look into how do we engage clients in gaining a better understanding of their needs and their wants, and how do we as a marketplace moving towards meeting that needs. And that's what we're doing on that regard. And that's what I've been leading on that practice. And in that regard, we also have developed the so-called Risk Managers Academy in London. Every year, we'll invite through RIMS, this is a partnership with the RIMS organization. So every year, we'll invite through the RIMS National, a group of risk managers, and coming to London, spend 2.5 days in London, in the Lloyds building, and getting to know the Lloyds under the Lloyds brokers at a personal level. As you guys know, if you have been to London, when you're in the building, that sense of being in Lloyds is totally different than just remote, virtual world. It's totally different feel. When you were walking on that escalator, you have a sense of appreciation how that market really works as a marketplace. It's not just a carrier, it's a whole market with 90+ carriers working together. And that energy, that face-to-face interaction is just amazing. And that's just irreplaceable. And that's what I miss about London right now, that we can't be there. So that's the second part of our job. And the last part of what I've been doing in the past, I would say 9 to 12 months is, with COVID shutting everything, keep us not able to travel, to see you in person, not to hug you and not even shake your hands because we're just so far away from each other. So how do we do business? We as a team came up with the idea of Tuesday with Lloyds, which is a virtual program that I've been being a big part of and being leading that, is we trying to connect London with US, with Americas together, trying to become a bridge. How do we really connect all of you in the virtual world? So we developed the Tuesday with Lloyds program, which Mark, I hope you can put that link. Thank you. So we have a program almost like bi-weekly. We bring London to you at your desktop in front of your computer. So you can hear the insight from the London market, from either the underwriters or from leaders in our Lloyds Corporation. Like last week, we had our chairman, early this week, we had our chairman speaking to you, bring his insight of what Lloyds is doing with our priorities and where we're progressing as far as the culture at Lloyds is concerned. So that's kind of my focus in the past few months, trying to bring London to you, to all of you between London and our stakeholders here in the region. So in a nutshell, our role is very unique. Not in a single day is the same as next day. We all do different things, but we all also be a resource, be the connector, and also be the one who is trying to help you, but understand Lloyds and be a resource to help you here. I'll pause right here. Any questions for me, you can put on the Q&A box, and I'd love to answer more questions, and as my teammates will share their story.
Thanks, Enya. That's fantastic. And I'm glad you got the plug in there for Tuesdays with Lloyds. I understand we had over 400 participants for the interview with Bruce, our chairman. So that audience continues to grow. And I would just reiterate what Enya said. Click on there. You can get the entire schedule. We also have all of the sessions are held on YouTube. So you can go to our YouTube channel, which will have that link probably included in there as well. And you can access those later if you're not able to actually meet the live session. We've had a lot of uptake on that as well. So thanks, Enya. Let's move on over to Dawnmarie, who's up in, is it snowing still in Vermont?
Oh no, we got like 65 and sunny today, so we're doing well. Very high. Tomorrow, it'll snow tomorrow. So thanks, Pat, and yeah, that was great. And I think what I just wanted to add a little bit to what Enya was saying is we started down this path of a global distribution refresh. We really looked at our distribution partners on the cover holder side and on the broker side starting last September. And we were basically given 6 weeks to completely look at our entire strategy across the corporation and come up with some new ideas and a new perspective on how we're really looking at the broker segment. But as a part of that, Enya was just talking about what our role is. We came up with a definition that our role is really a navigator. So we're the navigators of the market to help bring more business to Lloyds, help our stakeholders on the ground here. And, as Enya was saying, it can be a mysterious market. So there are times that, there's questions that people have that maybe the broker doesn't know the answer to, or we have a managing agent come to us and say, I'm really interested in writing this class of business. Tell us a little bit about the brokers in the US who write that. And what we'll do is we'll connect the two parties. We pull ourselves out of the situation and you guys continue on business as usual. So from the global distribution strategy, so in the US, I'm responsible for the US piece, but each of us, as we move into these new practices, there's a lot of overlap between what each of us do. So there'll be something coming out of risk management that will be important for brokers to know maybe. There's an intersection with cover holders, intersection with the managing agents without a doubt. Yes, it is really important that we understand what the appetite of our managing agents are to help our brokers and help guide them to good places to place their business. I just wanted to give you a quick sort of snapshot. So the top brokers, the top 5 global brokers represent 60% of the premium to Lloyds. And so around that, we've developed this, what we call global key account management process. And that is where, here in the US, I will work with colleagues in London and Singapore and Europe. And we're all looking at our Lloyd's relationship with those brokers in those regions, but we're sharing that information collectively. And then we're engaging sort of at each level within the brokerage firm, understand what the broker strategy is, help execute in any way we can, help with education. And then, very important to us are our impact brokers. So particularly here in the US, and that represents 31% of the premium into Lloyds. So, an impact broker is going to be your large wholesalers, your large retailers, anything that you would define as non-global, if you will, even if they've got some international presence. And so really important to us, again, a good chunk of Lloyd's business comes from that segment. So engaging with those brokers, again, understanding what their strategy is. bringing different practice groups in. So I might be working with a broker who is looking to set up a cover holder operation as a part of their operations. And then I can bring Rodney in and say, okay, can you help connect these people to the right people? So, and then other brokers make up 9% of our premium. Still very important business to Lloyd's. So looking at, okay, how are we fielding questions? How are we providing education? So it's the strategy exchange with those brokers. It's also helping them to understand what Lloyd's is doing. So if, future at Lloyd's, future set, what new technologies are coming out, what's happening in the London market with the Lloyd's brokers in the London market, and what's happening with the managing agents. We work closely with our development team in London as well. And so what this means for all of you is, better navigation of the market, better insights, and I think more directed insights and communication is towards what you actually want to hear. So sometimes I think we're really good about pushing all kinds of information out, and there's a lot of information, there's a lot going on at Lloyd. So it's really saying, okay, what's important to you and understanding that. Connecting you with expertise in London, again, connecting and navigating, and then we're not selling, we're not doing deals, we're leaving that to the experts, which is the brokers. And then education and advocacy and feedback. So one of the roles that we play here in the US is to listen to what is happening with our stakeholders in the US and make sure that that message is getting to London. So, decisions aren't being made that are going to impact people here without really understanding what the potential impact is and that kind of thing. So it's really important for London to understand from the US what is going on. So, and then one of the other roles that I have is I run the Lloyd's Broker Academy. So we have a working group of members of the market, and that consists of underwriters and brokers. And for 1 week a year, we bring 35 to 40 brokers, sort of 3 to 8 years in the business, doing business with Lloyd's, but rising stars within their company. Their company sponsors them to come to London in terms of travel costs. And then what we provide is a week-long program where they are completely immersed in the market. So they are meeting underwriters, they're meeting brokers, we do shadow days, we do education, and we have a lot of fun. We've got a darts night and a lot of activities outside of that. So keep your eyes open for that. If there's any interest, please just ping me an email. And then Pat's going to talk a little bit about the boot camp. So I won't steal your thunder, Pat, but we do look at the boot camp as a feeder as well into the Broker Academy. And then on the other side of that, we are working with the alumni to make sure that the alumni who have come through the Broker Academy all stay connected and continue to network as they move on in their careers. So that's it for me on brokers. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A or the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Dawnmarie, is it like fingers crossed that we'll have that you'll be in person this year for the Broker Academy?
Yeah, it's a go as of right now. So we'll see. None of us have a crystal ball, unfortunately, but as for now, we're still have the green light.
Good. We'll just keep fingers crossed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Anybody else have any comments before we move on to Rod and cover holders? Any other questions for Enya or Dawnmarie? Okay, Rod, let's learn about all things cover holder.
Happy to do it. So I'm one of the few people here that actually has a prop that goes along with mine. So let me get it in the screen. There we go. So
Nice.
if you're a cover holder and you don't have a plaque, you can see my ring light there too. Isn't that great? So
yeah.
But if you don't have a plaque, you need to talk to one of us and bug us for a plaque, right? So happy to get a plaque out to any cover holder. So as it turns out, over the years, leading up prior to this job at Lloyd's with me, I worked at several MGAs, and so that was kind of my background. That's the kind of area I came from, and so when I came to Lloyd's, it was early days for the U.S. team. We were still trying to develop the team and figure out what to do, and so I just naturally gravitated toward cover holders and MGAs because that's what I know. So it's worked out really well, though. Like I said, it's a huge production distribution channel for us. Mark, could you put up some slides and we'll kind of walk them through what the what the U.S. looks like as far as cover holders. So, and really before I get into the second slide, I kind of wanted to talk about, so the history of cover holders. You know, Lloyd's has been giving out the pen, as they say, for decades. And we have 3 cover holders here in Atlanta, for example, that back in the 60s, the early 60s, they got their first, contract with Lloyd's, and they still maintain, contracts with Lloyd's today. So, for 50 plus 60 years, we have been working this way in the U.S. And what you see today in the U.S. as a whole is a lot of other carriers now have caught on that this binding contract is the way to go. And so it's grown dramatically in the E&S market, not just with Lloyd's, but you'll see a lot of domestic carriers doing it as well. And what I like about cover holders, especially for Lloyd's, so if you think you've got all these folks in London, doing underwriting, they've got capacity, but to be able to deploy that capacity effectively, you really need cover holders because you don't have the specialist or the expertise in certain areas. And so cover holders will come to the market and say, oh, well, we know everything about this. Like, we can do this type of trucker, or we can do this type of account that's exposed to this this area or whatever. And they bring a whole lot of expertise in there that really allows the market to kind of deploy the capital so much better and really kind of get out there, because doing things on an open market basis is great. You get the 1 or 2 big accounts that you go through and everything, but this cover holder business can be high volume, kind of a lower dollar sometimes business, and it's great because it is quoted, it's issued, it's bound, all here in the States, all within the cover holder agreement. And the great thing about the cover holder business too is the retention rates. And so, accounts will come and go in the open market much more freely than they will in a cover holder distribution channel. What we see is that you have a much higher retention rate, probably in the 85 to 90% range in the cover holder business. So it's just a great business for us because, as you know, new business is expensive to bring in, and renewing a piece of business is not that expensive. So trying to maintain renewals is a great way to bring in the business. Mark, if you'll go on to the next one, let's give them a sense of what's going on here in the US. I'm sorry, this is global. So let's talk about the global real quick. About 14 billion in 2018 in cover holder premium globally, about 5,000 unique binding authorities, and about 4,000 cover holders. If you'll head on to the next slide, please, Mark. There we go. And so this actually kind of shows you the cover holders spread around the globe. And what you notice there is that we've got about 1,266, I guess is what it's saying there in the US. The UK has 1,300, so a big concentration right there in the UK, which does make a lot of sense. But Canada, 402, and the cover holders up there are a big part of their distribution channel. So we say about 32-33% in the US. It's even more when you get into Canada, and then also when you get into Australia as well. I did want to note that the 38 that we have in China are all fairly new. As a matter of fact, that whole idea of doing a cover holder distribution was very new to the Chinese government. So it took them a while to get accustomed to that because they really were not used to that. For them, it was an insurance carrier. It was working with an insurance agent, and that's how the business is brought in versus using these kind of MGAs or cover holders. So it's nice to see that that's really growing as well. Mark, if you move on to the next slide. Thanks. So here we are finally back in the US, and this slide is saying 38% of Lloyd's premium is written by cover holders, and it varies a little bit, but yeah, 38% in this year, sometimes 33%. We have seen a slight decline, and I'll show you that in a few slides, where last year we didn't write nearly as much business as what we wrote in 2019. Not a huge decline, but a slight decline. What you see here in the US, though, when you're looking at these states, is as the state is darker, that means there's more premium coming from that state. So you can kind of get a sense of where the premiums are coming from in the US. And you see that if you're in Illinois, that's a dark blue state, so it's producing a fair amount of premium out of that state. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the bar chart that just kind of shows you our top 5 cover holder producing states. If you look at Florida over there at the end, it's big in the property piece. That's the blue piece of that. So that kind of gives you a sense of where the cover holders are located around the US. I will note, like in Atlanta for me, there's 73 cover holders in Georgia. That's just because Atlanta tends to be an E&S hub. And so we have a whole lot of cover holders based in and around the Atlanta area. They tend to write business all over the U.S., especially in the Gulf Coast, as well as up and down the East Coast as well. If you'll move on to the next one, please, Mark. Thanks. So I was talking about the production, and again, I'm giving you guys a peek at numbers that aren't released yet, but this actually shows you how we're doing in the U.S. And so again, blue is insurance and gray is the reinsurance piece of it. And in 2019, we wrote about 7.3 billion. And then you can see in 2020, we're coming in at about 6.6, 6.7. So about 600 million less in premium. And we didn't actually, so if you remember back to the slides I did before, the US actually grew in 2020. And what we saw is some of the capacity went from cover holders in 2020 over into the open market and some into the reinsurance piece of it as well. So, you know, we did grow overall in the US, but we did see a slight decline in our cover holder production for 2020. And what, you know, it'll be interesting to see how we're doing for 2021. I keep up with our cover holders and our stakeholders all the time and ask them about their renewals and their capacity. Everybody seems to be doing fairly well so far. And the one thing that we're hearing from cover holders is, you know, their submission volumes are way up. So everybody seems to be very, very busy. You know, they're trying to maintain that flow as well as just hire staff to keep up with it. Mark, if you move on to the next one too. So this slide here is really showing you from our cover holders where the business is coming in, what lines of business. And we really have 7 or 8 lines of business that we produce a fair amount of business in for the cover holder piece. Property, the large one there you see at 3.3 billion, and then the casualty financial professional and casualty other at about $1.1 billion each. So still very, very strong there. I don't have the, I should have done this, but that we actually can show you how we have grown or declined over a period of 5 years in the cover holder business. And if you were to look at that, you'd see about a 5% growth in the property over a 5-year run. But if you were to look at the casualty financial professional, you'd see like a 20% growth. So growing very dramatically in casualty financial professional. We're also growing very quickly in the accident and health. That's probably in the 18% range. So very, very strong growth there. I think that's it for our slides, isn't it, Mark? There we go. Good. So, and then some of the other things I do along with the cover holder practice group is we actually run a cover holder advisory board. So the idea was that the cover holders wanted to have a voice within London, and at the same time, I think the folks in London wanted to have access to cover holders and say, look, if we're considering this guideline or we're looking at this, you know, data set, would this be something that would fit in with your kind of operational model? And, you know, give us feedback and opinions on that. Claims, whatever it happens to be, we can kind of go to the cover holder advisory board and say, you know, we're looking for some things. We want to see what you guys think about it, or what are the domestics doing? So it's been a great process. The cover holder advisory board is made up of about 12 cover holders, and the idea was we wanted to have a geographically dispersed group, and we also wanted to have some diversity in the product lines. So we have people that represent all kinds of different product lines on the board. And the one thing that we stayed away from was the large national cover holders. So we felt like, and actually Amwin said this to us, we've got a voice in London. You know, we don't think we should be a part of that. We think that, you know, the folks that are not as large as us need to be on this board. And so it's great because the board is really made up of you know, somewhat independent cover holders are able to give us a lot of great information. Some of the other things we're working on in the cover holder area is we do have a new system out now called Cover Holder Workbench. And so Cover Holder Workbench is a quote issue bind system. It is completely compliant with all of the regulations that are part of the cover holder process. It meets all of the PRA standards over in London. It actually feeds into the bordereau. As we come on with new systems over in London, it will automatically dump into those data systems. So it's just a nice little quote issue bind system. It also does some back office accounting work for you. So if you're a cover holder and you're using a system right now and you're considering, you know, changing, or you're looking at maybe a new product line and you don't want to devote resources to, you know, the system piece of it, Cover Holder Workbench is out there. Cover Holder Workbench is up and running here in the States. It's been running for about 6 months now. And it will do all of the E&S taxes for all the different states for you. And the great thing about Cover Holder Workbench is it's free for the first year, so there's no charge there. And then after you've used it for a year, it goes to it's 8,000 pounds is what they're charging now. So, you know, about $12,000 a year, which is a lot less than what you'd pay for a lot of the other ones. And the whole idea is this is a basic system, but it makes you fully compliant, especially if you're applying for a new cover holder application, maybe a new program. You know, when the folks in delegated authorities see that you're using cover holder workbench, they can just tick those boxes and move on. They don't have to know as much detail about how you're working because they know it's going to be in the system, it's going to be compliant. So it's out there, it's available. Let us know if you have any questions on that. We're happy to set up demos and give you some information on that. But it's just a great way to kind of onboard either new programs or onboard new cover holders as well. Some of the other things we're working on, I don't know if you may have seen the AM Best note that came out a few weeks ago. We're considering binding, I think my computer's crashed.
Lost audio, Rod. Uh-oh.
We lost audio of yours.
Yeah.
I'll be right there.
There you are. You're
I
back.
think you're back.
Good.
We got you back.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I have to put them up a password. I don't know what happened, but we're back. Okay. Thanks. So anyway, I was talking about the AM Best thing where they're looking to try to actually score and rate cover holders and delegated authorities. So we're working with our stakeholders. We're working with London. We've had calls this week with both WSIA and with target markets. And again, we're kind of looking at that, trying to make sure we get everybody's take on that and opinion on it, and that we all as a whole industry come out with kind of a unified front on that one. So we do a lot of work in that area. Same thing, you know, I had some phone calls last week with lobbyists. We're working on some legislation in Florida, and we wanted to know, you know, what the cover holders and the stakeholders thought about it and what they were interested in and not interested in. So a lot of work in that area as well. And then the last thing that we're kind of working on right now, and you're going to see a lot of this come out this summer. So we are doing a cover holder refresh globally, and then that also obviously applies to the US. And you're going to start to see new systems implemented this summer. So, you know, if you're accustomed to using Atlas as a cover holder, Atlas is going away. We're going to have a better system. I know everybody's happy to see Atlas go away. So we'll be doing things like that and introducing that. If you ever want any of that information or want to know what's going on, there's a great, if you just type in delegated authorities, Lloyds, on our website, it'll pop right up. And they actually have a newsletter they produce too. So you can click on their newsletter once a month. They'll kind of give you updates and status as far as, okay, the system is getting to this point, it's been tested, you know, we're expecting this rollout on this date. But we've got a lot of big things coming up from that standpoint for the summer as well. So outside of all that cover holder stuff, I also obviously do some of the regional work too, like Enya and Dawnmarie were saying. We really are here to facilitate and educate as well. The facilitating piece, I do want to give a shout out to Mark Rector, because, you know, when people ask me, hey, I need to insure this, you know, horse's hoof or whatever it is, I have no idea what a lot of that stuff is, but Mark keeps the books. He's got all these books behind him or somewhere. I don't know how he knows all these things, but he makes us look good, at least when the inquiries come in. So, and then talking about, just to kind of back up on and Enya's part about the educational piece. Yes, we you know, we have a lot of Lloyd's courses that are CE approved. So, you know, if you want to go out to your retail agents or you want to go out to your staff and say, hey, you know, let's go sit for 50 minutes and get an hour's worth of CE credit. You know, they're pretty interesting, I think, because it is Lloyd's, and we do a little bit of history, but we have just a lot of good information that's in there. We can do them in multiple hours if you really want to sit through us doing that as well. As a matter of fact, last week I had to do one for the Carolina agents where it was a 3-hour run, and we actually recorded that one and put it on the web so they could just watch it on demand. But those are out there and available. It doesn't have to be Lloyd's based, so it actually can be based on other things too. And I've done them on cat modeling. I've done them on all kinds of things. So if there's something that you're looking for, we're happy to help out. It's kind of all part of our job is to promote the market. With that, I'll be quiet for a while. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thanks for the time.
Great, Rod. I mean, you covered a lot of territory there and a lot of good things there. Particularly, it's good to see that. Yeah, we stand ready to assist. If there are any educational needs or remote presentations or whatever it might be. Absolutely get in touch with us. And yeah, Rod sort of holds the world's record for marathon sessions. He does a little soft shoe in the middle and doesn't drink any fluids for the day before.
I have extra cushions in my seat right now because I've been sitting so much this week doing these 4-hour versions of this. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, those are all memorialized. If you want to access them, it's like DVR, and you can maybe skip through some of the parts, or no, you have to watch the whole thing, right, Rod?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's locked down. You can't fast forward. You have to go through it. So.
It's like on demand. Well, good. I'll kind of my area, and we'll try and stay on schedule here. Is again, we talked in you. Mitch started off saying that we formerly had geographic designations as regional directors, which were structured by state, but now we've gone more what we call geographically agnostic and are now focusing on specific disciplines. Enya, as she said, risk managers, Rod cover holders, Dawnmarie, brokers. The newest one is the managing agent practice group, which we formed last year. And we talked a little bit about what that is, what a managing agent is and what the responsibility is. But one of our big challenges for Lloyds has always been, data has always been a big challenge, but we're now trying to find a way where because of our involvement every day with distribution partners throughout the US, we get a lot of good intelligence. But at the same time, it would really facilitate Lloyd's US business to the extent we're able to reflect what the managing agent's specific appetites are in the US. Where do they want to grow? Where might they be contracting? Do they have an interest or an axe in a certain particular class of business? And because we're, as Rod said, the thing about Lloyd's being a market is that unlike a traditional carrier where you know exactly who to call, the challenge with Lloyd's, where you've got 20,000 different brokers and underwriters, is finding out who do I speak to about what. So we're trying to cut through that, and the way to do that is to develop appetite and risk appetite and capacity information to the extent we can from the managing agents, and that way we're much better able to share with our distribution partners and help link them up. So it's really it's a question of intelligence gathering. Also, because it can be challenging to be remote from a business. I mean, you wouldn't want to run something where you're non-resident, and so Lloyd's being there, we're sort of the eyes and ears on the ground, so we have a better sense, a lot of times on, what's the competition doing? What are emerging threats we seeing from the regulatory perspective, or what emerging risks are we seeing that might be a commercial opportunity? So our objective is to build a two-way street with the managing agents of open and constructive dialogue, where they're helping us understand what their needs and wants are to help us in our discussions, but also that we can bring them intelligence that will help them facilitate their business by knowing what's going on and what are we seeing on the ground up close. Because as we all know, the world is becoming a smaller place. Things move very quickly, and we have to be able to react accordingly and share that information. As Enya mentioned, Tuesdays with Lloyds has been a big hit in terms of sharing information, but we also have a special sub-series within that called Syndicate Showcase, where we're actually once per month, we're hosting top management from one of the managing agencies to give us their high-level view and discuss what their specialties are, what their appetite is, and what their business plans look like. In January, we had Apollo. Tuesday, February was Aegis Syndicate, and then just a few weeks ago, we had Hiscox. So those are being booked all the way out through, we're already into the first quarter of next year. So we particularly hope you'll tune in for those, because that's giving us the entree into building a more robust ability to reflect capacity and business plans for the syndicates, which helps you downstream as a distributor or stakeholder. That just goes hand in glove, that you'll want to know what these appetites and interests are, and it helps us all in our job. A couple other things I'd mentioned earlier. I'm responsible for Lloyd's 3 licenses. These licenses, and some people find this, kind of an interesting story, that, Lloyd's was writing in the U.S. as far back as the late 1800s. And then, the 1907 San Francisco quake really cemented Lloyd's reputation here in the U.S. as walking the walk and being there when it's needed. So it was natural to think that, Lloyd's needed some bricks and mortar presence here in the U.S. Illinois was the first license that was granted in I think 1929. Lloyd's was already doing a lot of bankers business in Illinois, so it was the first. A lot of people say, ask why not New York or California, but that's really what was driving it. The second license was Kentucky in 1937, where Lloyd's was already writing kind of in an ad hoc sort of surplus lines way, bloodstock, a lot of thoroughbreds. And so the assumption, I think, was that licenses would proliferate and there would be, every state would have a Lloyd's license, but that really was it. We added the U.S. Virgin Islands in 1971, and that was really it. So the biggest move on that now is that we have just last year conducted an exhaustive study, and the determination was made that the small piece of business, which, as Rod said, is about 1% our admitted business, it really doesn't fit into the core strengths and strategic plan for Lloyd's moving forward, which is all surplus lines and reinsurance based. So we're in the middle of a multi-year process to relinquish those 3 licenses. We've reached agreements with the 3 respective regulators where we'll be allowing, an ample period of time to write new and renewal business, and then to transition that business over a period of years to, some of that business may remain on a surplus lines basis or could potentially be written through a front. But some of that business we expect would move into other markets. The USVI, we're half of the market there because people aren't standing in line to pick up that much cat exposure. Lloyd's is, I think, we write about $100 million in premium there, but when Irma and Maria came through in 17, I think the last I saw those losses were $700-800 million. So there goes 20 years of accreted premium.
Right.
So tough.
Didn't we write 60% of all the TIV on the island?
Yeah, the numbers were just, incredible. Back in the 80s, Lloyd's was a very small part. And then after, I forget, Hugo, one of the hurricanes that came through, all the domestics kind of pulled up stakes and Lloyd's became bigger and bigger and became, the dominant writer there. So in that case, we're adding a few more years to make a smooth transition. And we suspect that a fair amount of that business will actually just migrate to surplus lines because, again, as I said, it's an enormous cat exposure. And I don't know that there are a lot of other markets that would be eager to pick up that highly concentrated
and Pat, could you tell us how you got this gig where you get to work the USVI and the rest of us just have to stay on the mainland? And then maybe you could share your experience of your most recent trip.
There's an old saying, even the blind squirrel finds the occasional nut. Is that right? Because when I started with Lloyd's, I was just in charge of Kentucky, and then it's just morphed out. So yeah, unfortunately,
it's a natural progression. Kentucky, USVI, I can see it.
Yeah, the Central U.S. That's what. Yeah, what are we doing in the Caribbean? So unfortunately, I have to go down there pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID. You do have the burden of St. Croix and St. Thomas. So we can't always be on the upside of things. But
no, you're earning your paycheck those days.
Exactly right. So if anyone has any questions about that, if I know some people in this audience probably do have some admitted business in Illinois, Kentucky, and Tom Overwetter in the Chicago office or myself, we're all standing ready to answer any questions you may have on that. And lastly, I guess the last thing I'd like to point out, which Dawnmarie had mentioned, is that, the one thing that we all do collectively is, if there's a common theme, it's education. As we said before, a lot of people, they understand and recognize Lloyd's, but there's some misperceptions there. So what we do, we mentioned the boot camp. We started this about 4 years ago. It's really a day and a half, very intense. We call it a deep dive into Lloyd's, everything Lloyd's. You come in and we have a class of business segments that are facilitated by industry professionals. We have underwriters over from London. We give very hands-on, practical demonstrations of what is the role of the broker, what is the role of the underwriter, and just claims and everything else that fits into that. So because a lot, in today's world, people want to, they have a risk to bind, they want to get on with it. So we need to try and remove those barriers and make sure that Lloyd's is viewed as the first alternative or first stop to place that. And so to do that, it's all about education. The boot camp is held this year. It'll be in September. We're hoping that it will be in New York. We're hoping it'll be in person. Last year we had to pivot and we did it virtually. So it could be hopefully in person this year. If not, it might be some sort of hybrid where some in person, some virtual. But in any event, that's going to continue to go on. It's a great social event as well. A lot of networking. We typically hold that in Chicago. We take the boat cruise out on Lake Michigan. And so that's something you should definitely look into, and Mark has all the information on that. So that's sort of a nutshell of what I do. And I guess before we head to our second break and then we come back with Carey, I think we should probably throw in another trivia question here. Mark, I was thinking we might do trivia question number 5 as a follow-up. There we go. Now, we mentioned Troy Polamalu earlier, so there you go. Let's see what was, we're getting into terms and conditions here. So give us your best bet. And Rod, when I was prepping that, I looked at it, so I misread it before. So 3 of these are conditions.
That's right. Yeah. And so it was interesting. I got to speak with the underwriter, JT, who wrote this. He was with the Watkins Syndicate. And, it was kind of, when you see these things, right, it's a joke, right? You're writing somebody's hair, you're writing, right? He said, no, it's serious. So, you have to define everything when you do this. It's a manuscript policy. So what's the coverage territory? Where does the hair end? Where does the hair begin, right? How far down his neck do we cover? And so you have to define all of these different things. And then he said, then we have to define, what's the coverage trigger? So, for them, it was a 30% loss of hair, but how do you define that? Is it so many hair follicles per, per inch or whatever it happens to be? So all these different things that he had to factor in there. The poll result, so if you don't mind, I'll run through that.
Yeah.
So not allowed to take up fire breathing as a hobby? Yes, that was one of the requirements of the policy. And as a matter of fact, JT put that in just as a slight joke because Troy is of Polynesian descent. So just had a bit of fun with him on that one. Restricted from mountain climbing. Yes, that was part of the policy. And then required to steer clear of candles at nightclubs. Obviously, if you're a big NFL star, you might be at a nightclub. And so they were hoping he would stay away from them as well. So the first 3 are correct. And the Head and Shoulders requirement was not part of the policy. That was that was a little trick there, since Head and Shoulders paid for the policy, but that was not part of it. One of the other interesting things that JT was telling me about this policy is he said, normally we do all these policies and a whole lot of work on them, and then eventually you kind of get that order to bind. And he said, this is the one time when I remembered when they gave me the order to bind. He said it was just kind of one of those flashbulb moments where he said, I was in the United States, I was on holiday, and he said I was right out in front of Graceland with my family about to go in and tour Elvis's home, and I got the call to bind it. So he said it just all kind of came together that way, that he happened to be in front of Graceland as he's walking in there.
You should have bought a lottery ticket too on a day like that.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that's great. Again, the trivia is fascinating. I think we're running a little bit behind schedule, so let's do this. Let's go to our second break. Let's maybe come back. It's 10:52. Let's make that a 10-minute break. Come back at 11:02 because we want to give Carey plenty of time to cover claims. So with that, let's just take our next break. Thanks, Mark. You want to do whatever your magic is. Okay, and welcome back. Hope your second break. Sorry it was a little short. We've been going a little bit long and we're trying to stay on point. Before we kick off with our final discussion with Carey, we want to take one last quick poll here. It's really for our own information. Mark, you want to put that up regarding rims? And again, if any of the questions, you have questions after this event, feel free to continue to submit them, or you can email us or send it to the ALB or whatever. We're more than happy to follow up in any capacity that, sometimes we tend to generate more questions than we do answer questions. So certainly we're happy to follow up that way. Okay, we're just accumulating this information. We're trying to do some planning for that. But while that's going on, we want to take this opportunity to welcome again Kerry Bond, who joined us, as he said, 6 months ago. Your honeymoon's over now, Kerry, so you're in the fire. So this is great to have a claims resource that's on board with us here in the U.S. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you, Kerry.
Outstanding. And folks, I tell you, it is really a pleasure and an honor to be here. And the thing that I'll acknowledge up front, it's hard to make claims sexy. It really is. But I'll do the best I can. Well, my role was established as part of the future at Lloyd's. What Lloyd's did is they listened to the market, and what the market was telling them is that it's kind of hard to manage claims clear across the Atlantic Ocean. So the solution was to create a head of claims position here in the United States to coordinate claims efforts in the Lloyd's market, and when it comes to the claims space, for those entities that are associated with Lloyd's. So when you think about the amount of property insurance that's in the Lloyd's market, as Rod illustrated in his slides, the biggest threat to the industry is, of course, the weather. And in the recent years, there's been discussions around climate change and whether it's going to impact the industry or not. But what we're seeing in real life is the frequency and severity of hurricane and wind events are rising. And it's not just along the Gulf and Atlantic coast, as demonstrated by the derecho that happened out in Iowa last year. We're seeing unprecedented weather events. And as we speak, I was on the call earlier today about Winter Storm Uri. Now, I lived in Houston for, 12, 13 years, and I think it snowed once. It snowed at 6 a.m., dropped an inch or two. By noon, it was gone, and it was sunny and 80 degrees by 5 o'clock. But when you look at the extent of that storm, where you had 4 days of unprecedented cold and freezing, and the following week, the temperatures were back in the 70s and 80s. So is climate change real? Well, that's to be determined. So right now, my focus is to learn the Lloyd's market, because my entire career has been with domestic carriers here in the United States. And I think from that experience, we've learned to handle claims reasonably well, I think. So what we're doing now is basically setting out some focus areas. And Mark, if you could put up my slide deck, I'll talk through those. And that's my introductory slide. All right. These are the three things I'd like to talk about today, and I swear I'll be brief. I won't do death by 1,000 PowerPoints. But the head of claim focus areas. I've sent out my focus areas to the heads of claims of all the companies that underwrite business with Lloyd's. And the intent was to help them understand how I could help them and how I can impact claims performance here in the United States. My focus areas that I sent out to those heads of claims is my first and foremost focus was to build relationships with the U.S. top producers and the key TPAs that handle business for those brokers, MGAs, and cover holders. The intent there was to make sure that we can have candid conversations about claims performance. As it stands, it seems that when the weather turns bad or when the plaintiff's bar gets low antsy, well, the claims impact has a lot of potential to go sideways. And the key intent of a claims person is to make sure that when you as a producer, you're sitting in front of a client, is to make sure that the assurance that you give them that if bad things happen, well, we got you covered from a claim standpoint. Well, delivering on that promise is where I come in. In my experience, when I was a professional stormtrooper, if you could get Lloyd's work, oh man, it was time to make it rain because Lloyd's paid well. And the expectations were nowhere near what they were for the work that you do for an admitted carrier. And you could make a lot of money without doing a lot of work. And I thought that that would disqualify me for the position because I had come from that community, but it's actually something that helps me to be able to have those candid conversations, both in the producer channels as well as the claims channels. Now, a for instance that I'd give you is when I worked for Nationwide, we had Hurricane Isabel to make landfall in Virginia, one of the few times that Virginia has been hit. Well, what do you know? A lot of the guys that I'd stormtrooped with, they came to Virginia to work that storm. I knew a lot of them. I still know a lot of them. And the point that I made with them is I brought them all into a room, and we had a claims guy to claims guy conversation. And that conversation was this: you guys know me, I know you. The stuff that I used to do with you, don't do it here. And that's been my mantle for the most part as I've come into each role that I've been in since I've come back to the corporate side of the house. I kind of get it, what happens in the field, and I understand what's going to happen, but just don't do it when you're doing Lloyd's work. So that's been one of my primary focuses, is to make sure that I'm able to have those open and candid conversations both in the producer and claims channels. Another one of my key focuses was CAT response, coordination, and then the performance management within the CAT space. The insurance village is a recent development that's been put into place, and most notably in Florida, where the Department of Insurance of any respective state that has a CAT event that's ongoing. And they, in some cases, yeah, it's a little bit of a show, but in other cases, it's vitally important that key communications get out to the insurance consuming public, because a lot like Lloyd's market, people think they understand it until it's time for an actual action to happen. So in a CAT event, in some cases, it's the first time that someone has had their assets put at risk. And they're concerned, and rightfully so. So where do you go to find answers? The first place is normally to the producer that produced a policy that got them there in the first place. Second place is going to be a claims person. And if that claims person handles that communication not so good, well, not so good things follow. Well, part of what I've done is I had what's called a claims conversation. As Enya pointed out, Tuesdays at Lloyd's is an ongoing conversation that is happening fairly often. The claims conversation is a quarterly feedback session for me and the claims community here in the United States. And the session that I had yesterday, one of the things that I emphasize is preparation for the CAT season. You can't prepare for it when you're in it. You got to do it now in first and second quarter to prepare for third and fourth quarter. The resourcing issue is something that's a bit of a concern. One of the things that I saw last fall, it was unprecedented. We had so many named storms that it was historic. Not only that, we had 5 to make landfall in the United States. The miraculous thing that happened is that it didn't hit a major metropolitan area. 2 of those storms went right between Houston and New Orleans. And we both know how Harvey and Katrina turned out when you get a major storm in a major metropolitan area. The things that I suggested to the claims community is what did you learn? And from that learning, what have you done to adjust? Because we're not going to be so lucky every time that a wind event doesn't hit a major metropolitan area. So planning, not only for resourcing, but also processes and procedures so that from a producer standpoint, you're not getting people calling you every day, well, what's going on with my claim and why isn't X, Y, or Z happening? It remains in the claims channel, and we resolve those issues so that when it comes to image and influence in the market, what won't happen is you won't have to explain why you had a bad claims experience. The other part is Blueprint 2 and how that influences what's happening in the United States. The Lloyds lab, as we speak, they brought on some of the third-party administrators that handle claims here in the United States to field test some of the ideas and concepts that will not only improve productivity, but also impact expense. A for instance is if it takes 4 weeks to get a check in a person's hand after a claims person has been at their house, that's a problem. But it's also been in the past experience in the Lloyds claim channel. Some of the things that have been tested in the Lloyds channel so far has reduced that time down to a matter of 10 days. And that's still not ideal, and it's still a work in progress, but you can't turn the Titanic after it's hit the iceberg. So the thing is we have to continue reaching out to vendors, looking at our processes and procedures, and continuing to test them so that we continue to reduce the time so we get to faster claims payments. We get to a more digitalized process so that from the time that the policy is bound and brought into the Lloyds system, we're gathering data all along the way so that when a claim does happen, it's not going out trying to capture information that we may already have. Is capturing it from the time that particular client comes into the Lloyds system. The future at Lloyds is a process that's scheduled to end in 2023. The popular thing in my view is that it's not a tactical solution, it's more of a strategic solution in recognition of an issue and an opportunity that existed in the Lloyds market. So as we continue to work with the Lloyds lab, to get a gauge on how some of the TPAs are handling business, what some of the vendor opportunities may be. We continue to work on those things so that we're able to get the best product out there so that the outcome is more positive, and from a producer standpoint, you have more to sell with more reliability than we may have had in the past. It's also my intent to establish key relationships with the DOIs in all states, but more importantly in 4 key states. And those 4 key states, Florida, Texas, California, and to some degree, Louisiana. Now, you'll notice that these are all coastal states with their various things that will come towards us. But in the claims world, Florida has no peer when it comes to the plaintiff bar. Texas is secondary to them, and California on a given day could tie with either of them. And Louisiana to a lesser degree. My intent is to build as solid a relationship in the claims function within the departments of insurance so that if there's issues that are coming up, they'll call me first and give us an opportunity to resolve those issues before they truly become an issue. The other thing that I'm working on is legal spend. There have been some things anecdotally that I'll say were surprising. And it's simply because of my newness to the market. I'll put that caveat in there. But how we retain and look at vendors and actually use them, it bears a look. And that'll be one of my focus areas in 2021. Because here's the deal. When you look at a total combined ratio and you look at the expense portion, is there something in there that you can control? In some cases, yeah. And from a claims perspective, that's normally where you can find impact. I'm not saying that it's there because, again, the instances that I've seen have been anecdotal, but part of the Blueprint 2 process is gathering data so that there'll be substance behind the anecdotal data that I'm getting now. So we'll see how that goes. The other part of my focus areas is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I applaud Lloyds for stepping up and owning the part that it played in the slave trade. That to me is huge, absolutely huge. And that's one of my focus areas, is to keep that in the forefront as I'm having conversations with various claims agencies out there, and keep that up front and forward. The other thing that I'll look at and talk about during 2021 is a CAT portal. It's something that we get data requests from all of the states that we've had claims events in. Their requests to see how long it takes us to pay a claim, what the claims are paid, how much they're worth. And up until last week, it was a manual process for the most part. We send out spreadsheets and ask claims organizations to complete them, both open market and in the DA space. Right now, the CAT portal has gone through the testing phase. We fully fielded it last week, and it's alive and active. We've been able to do data calls starting in January. The potential is absolutely huge from a data gathering standpoint. We'll have a conversation on April 21st with the DA community about its uses and the dashboard that's being developed for it. And we think that it's going to be a hit. So far it has been. We think in the go forward it'll continue to be. Another opportunity that I have and I'm proud to be a part of is in the DA space. We're going to be grandfathering and onboarding every TPA that touches a Lloyd's related claim. What that means is those entities that have been handling claims for Lloyd's for years, we're going to grandfather them in. The process will be the same for new TPAs that are looking to come on board. Is where we gather due diligence material to make sure that we're getting as consistent a product as we're able to. And also over time, and at the end of the Blueprint 2 process, bordereaux will be something that it won't be an afterthought, but the quality of the data, by the time we finish all the testing and fielding, we should be able to get what we need from that process. Next slide, please. And I thought this was a really cool slide just to emphasize the gathering of digital data and what it could mean. And I'll leave this slide up for a second so you can look through it, but it's basically an encapsulation of what I just very vaguely pointed out. It brings some degree of specificity to it. And we think, from a claims perspective, data is the name of the game. MIS is a satellite imagery company that we made arrangements with that will provide imaging services to us, but it goes deeper than that. The thing that it gives us that we weren't able to get before and that we were able to field test during the hurricane season is what were the tidal conditions? What was the wind speed at the ground? How high did the water rise? How quickly did it rise? Where did it start from? Where did it end? Typically, this was something that we determined by Kentucky windage. We get that thumb out there and we guess real good. But right now, with MIS, we have the ability to get satellite shots that show the catastrophe area both before and after. And more importantly, we can drop down to ground level and take a look around from a digital perspective so that we can get layers of data versus just a satellite shot. Next slide, please. Well, again, I didn't want to kill you with PowerPoints and things like that, but if you want to learn more, these are the avenues that you can take to get there. And I stand prepared for your questions. Next slide, please.
And Carey, I have a question. Since you started in August,
Try to get there quickly.
And you know,
Again,
it's obviously been a lot of events since the day you started. So, is your nickname Catastrophic Carey? Is that what you go by now?
Okay, Ron, I see your mouth moving, but I didn't hear anything.
Sorry.
Selective hearing issue. No, Carey, it's great to see. Having been in with Lloyd's a long time, it's good to see that there's some work being done downstream, in terms of the TPAs and who are the face of Lloyd's, to see this process being streamlined and some best practices being employed. And, because again, that's who the end user often see as the person that shows up. So it's good that we're working to streamline and make that consistent. I think Carrie's audio is maybe gone. So
Okay.
don't worry. Did you hear that, Carrie? Yeah. It's okay. So look, that's okay. Don't worry about it, Carrie.
Always a technical issue.
It's live TV or whatever. No,
that's right.
We have a couple minutes left, and again, some of these questions I think that we've gotten, we can get back with, come back to you. Some of them we may have to research them a little bit. But Rod, Lloyd spent 250 years, its first 250 years as a marine market, and he has something a pretty good case study of a claim that's right in his own backyard near Atlanta. And he was going to share some of this with you to give you kind of an insight into the sort of claims and size of events that Lloyd's deals with. You have those, Rod?
I do. So hopefully this is starting to pop up for you guys. Let's see if I can get the slideshow version of it working. There we go. So anyway, because I'm in Georgia, this is a big thing for us. You may not have heard about this, but this is the Golden Ray. So it's one of those roll-on, roll-off ships. It shuttles cars through the auto industry's kind of global supply chain. And it's really just kind of been a nondescript ship operating for a couple of years. The crazy thing about it is 17 stories tall, and it's more than 2 football fields long. So it's a huge, huge ship. Anyway, as it was coming out of, let's see if we get this to forward. I'll be right with you guys. I'm here. I'm just trying to get on to the next slide. Huh. Let's see if that's any better. There we go. That's it. Sorry about that. So anyway, September 2019, the Golden Ray departed Brunswick, Georgia, which is, we have a pretty small coastline here in Georgia. We have really Savannah, and then Brunswick is kind of our other port. Anyway, the Golden Ray had about 4,200 cars on it, and it developed a catastrophic list. And what had occurred is when they were bringing the ship over from Texas, actually, they had disposed of a lot of the ballast water that kind of weighted the bottom of the ship. About 16,000 pounds they took off. And then also what they ended up doing too was when they got to Brunswick, they took off several thousand cars and they put on about 1,000 SUVs. And the SUVs were heavier than the cars. And so that made the ship list, and you can kind of see it laying on its side here at this point. In this picture, they're really just trying to maintain the kind of oils and things that are coming off the ship, and eventually they are able to kind of move the ship out of the shipping lane, because it is a fairly small shipping lane there, and actually it's probably the 5th busiest car roll-on, roll-off shipping lane in the world. So then this is where the ship is still kind of, you can see this gentleman, he's standing on the beach in St. Simons. And you can see across there that the ship behind him, and then beyond that, that is Jekyll Island. So you can kind of get a sense of how narrow the passage is there. What they ended up deciding to do was they were going to cut the ship up into 7 different parts. And so to do that, they brought in this huge crane that literally just goes over the top of the ship. They attached it to the starboard side of the ship, and then they're going to lift it up. And what you see in this graphic is, if you look at the bottom, they have a chain that they're going to drag back and forth underneath the bottom of the hull, or would be the side of the hull in this case. And that's going to cut it into seven parts. Then they'll go out and scrap those. So this kind of gives you a sense of the sheer magnitude of the event, right? So you can still see St. Simons Island in the background there. That's the pier kind of right there. And they've moved the ship away now from St. Simons a little bit. It's closer to Jekyll Island. But there is the crane that has actually lifted the entire ship out of the water. And what they're doing here is they're bringing up a barge and they're going to take one of those sections when they cut it and remove this thing. So it's just amazing the sheer magnitude of all of this. And so much of this, the crane already existed, but so much of the barge and all the work on the barge or everything else had to be built from scratch. So it's incredible the amount of effort that they're putting into this. What you can see in this one is one of the parts that they've cut off now, so that they were successful in cutting it off. This is on a barge, and actually it'll be on its way down to Louisiana for recycling. The interesting thing about this is if you're a marine underwriter, is the hull of the Golden Ray was insured for $87 million. And at this point, the salvage is over $400 million. So it's pretty tough for these guys to kind of figure out, you know, how things are, right? I have a $87 million ship, but somehow it's going to cost me almost $500 million if the ship goes down somewhere where, you know, it has to be removed and has to be removed kind of delicately versus if it just ran aground, you know, somewhere remotely and they could kind of dismantle it that way. So I just thought these pictures are really interesting. It's still ongoing. We do expect, and they're hopeful that maybe they will get this ship completely dismantled in time for the summer kind of tourist season down in that area. But it has been a whole lot of curiosity around that. As a matter of fact, if you go to either one of those islands, you know, you can get all kinds of T-shirts and things like that that reference the Golden Ray. So that's just one of our current claims that we have ongoing right now.
Send me one of those shirts, Rod, extra large.
Yeah,
That's just fascinating.
I would say for you, you probably need a crop top, Pat, but we'll go with the extra large.
Hey, well, we're gonna cut the sleeves off. Well, with that, we're gonna. I guess. Well, I know we're running up against the stop here. So, Mark, you want to wrap it up for us and give any last minute advice to the attendees?
Thanks, Pat. And thanks to Rod and Carey and Dawnmarie and Enya for taking part in the session today. Thanks to all of you for attending. Please visit linktoloyds.com. That's where you can sign up for CE credit. You can see links to our upcoming seminars. We're going to be doing 4 this year, as well as 2 ethics classes. The next one is April 7th. You'll also be able to find a link to our Tuesdays with Lloyds presentations, which are all streamed on our YouTube channel, and we encourage you to check that out. So again, with that, thank you, everybody. Stay safe and